Hello, everybody. Jim Feist for Proline TV. Andy Iskoe joining me. He should be on the screen here about now. There he is.
There I am.
Andy, how are you today?
I am actually pretty good. A little hungry, but that won't last too long. And looking forward to the weekend. It's kind of nice to have, even though I didn't make any plays. Well, I played one of the Wednesday college games, but it's nice to have games starting on Tuesday nights, which we had a few games earlier this week in the colleges. And I'm happy that the NFL did something smart with their Monday night doubleheader this week. It's actually a doubleheader. One game starts, I think, at 4, and the other starts at 7, if I remember. So you don't have the overlapping games, which I think is a very stupid
that is
idea.
correct, and that's good. Yes, and they're actually two pretty good games.
Yeah.
They're both. Well, you can look at the lines. It's 5.5 on one and 3 or 3.5 on the other. And
yeah, we don't know what yet to make about Houston, although they seem to have overcome some of their early season troubles. But the other three teams, Seattle, Tampa Bay, and Detroit. Well, Detroit and Tampa Bay were playoff teams last year. Seattle lost out, I think, wild card because they were 10-7 and didn't make the playoffs, and they all three appear headed this year. So I think that's and Houston is playing better. So those are two very compelling Monday night games.
Absolutely. Lots to talk about. Well, we have to, the contests this past week didn't have a lot of decisions that eliminated a bunch of people, but we didn't do the show, the podcast last week, mostly because I was a little ill. I'm still
under the weather.
Yeah, under some kind of weather. Yeah. So
we didn't talk about the carnage of I guess it was week 5.
Oh my God. It got murdered.
I was one of the victims.
Oh, no.
In that crazy game that everybody was on. Well, the two big upsets that week. On Thursday night when the Rams lost to the 49ers. Now, there were, I'll just give a little recap, 18,718 original entries playing for a winner-take-all, last man standing, or no, if it goes the full contest, could be multiple winners or split it, $18,718,000. Which is kind of a nice staggering number. Through weeks 1 through 4, about a third of the pool was eliminated. 6,314. There may have been some where we had like over 1,000. I don't recall exactly, but that left 12,404 entries alive heading into week 5. And that was the week where more than half the remaining pool was eliminated. Over 7,700 were eliminated. And that began Thursday night with the 49ers taking that early 14-0 lead at the Rams. Ultimately coming back, did the Rams, and 49ers won on that field goal in overtime. So 3,500, almost half of all the people who were eliminated that week were eliminated when the Rams lost, and not quite that amount, but still a very significant number, a little bit less than that. 3,152 were eliminated when the Cardinals lost that wild game to Tennessee on that ball that was dropped before the runner was going to enter the end zone, and then on that bizarre interception where the Titans threw the ball. It was intercepted by Arizona. Arizona fumbled. It went forward, and the ball was recovered in the end zone by one of the Tennessee players to win. So it looked as though they were going to be up, I think it was 28-3. And instead they ended up losing 22-21. And it's interesting because, and I guess I know the answer, but I remember you remember the old, what was it? The play with Dave Casper, the Holy Roller play.
Yes.
And they changed the rule so that you can't advance it if you recover a fumble like that.
Correct.
But I think that was because it was the offensive team who recovered it. I think in the Arizona game, it may have been touched upon somewhere. I didn't look at it too closely. But because the ball had changed possession when Arizona intercepted it and then fumbled it, they could not advance it. But if it was recovered by what was now the defensive team, actually, which was Tennessee, the team that threw the interception, they were able to advance it and ultimately recovered it in the end zone.
I mean, remember that Casper play was so obvious that it was intentional what they did.
And no, that was Hal Davis. Just win, baby.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
But they had, No, go ahead. I was going to say.
Well, that was a hell of a play, and They didn't know what to do with it at the time, and then they changed the rule.
It's not quite as memorable because of the circumstances. I believe that was a regular season game. Not quite as memorable as the Immaculate Reception, which occurred in the playoffs, also involving the Raiders.
Right. Well, the
Steelers,
Raiders are involved.
Franco
And
Harris,
now we got the Raiders here, and they got to figure out a way to win some games. Beating Tennessee is like beating a high school team because
I haven't seen the number this week, but based upon the side and the total, I want to see what number they put up on the Raiders' total points, because that might be a nice under.
Well, yeah, they're not going to.
We'll talk about when we talk about the alternate line.
They're not going to score much, that's for sure.
Yeah. The other team that lost big that week, Bills, when they lost at home to the Patriots, 756 were eliminated there. So between the Rams, the Cardinals, and the Bills, it was what, 66, almost 75 of the 7,700, 7,500 of the 7,700 were eliminated, leading 46-46 alive into last week. And it was a rather boring week because there were only 228 eliminated last week, leaving 4,418 of the original 18, 7+ alive. The average value, the average of each entry now is $4,237. Now, the interesting stat, and I didn't get to mention it on our podcast. I think you had already left our podcast this morning when we preview. There were 5 entrants last week who did not submit a pick, meaning that they had gone 5 weeks with winning selections and didn't put in a pick. That brings to, you want to guess what the total is for the first 6 weeks of how many people did not put in a pick?
No, I would not be able to guess.
90.
Wow.
$90,000 went to waste because people, for whatever reason, did not make a pick.
Wow.
Yeah, the 2 biggest losers last week were Eagles at 89 and the Commanders at 70. So that was 159. Add another 48 for the Cowboys. So that was basically the entire field. That was 207 out of the, actually 223 who lost. And then, of course, you add the 5 in who didn't submit and automatically lost. So a quiet week last week. It'll be interesting this week to see what the number 1 selection is, because when you take a look at the lines for the contest for the Circa the Pick 5 contest, the only big favorite this week is the Chiefs over the Raiders, 11.5. The next highest line, and this is kind of interesting because it does explain why we've seen a lot of changes in home underdogs over the years as far as not being as profitable. Highest other line this week in the other 13 games to be played is Browns over Titans at 7 and Broncos over Giants at 7. We are seeing fewer and fewer lines over 7, 7.5. I think I can ever recall.
You mean the Patriots are 7, not the Browns.
Yeah, I'm sorry. The Patriots over the Titans. And let's see, the other one is the Broncos over the Giants, 7, and the Packers over the Cardinals, 6.5. We're just not seeing a lot of large lines anymore.
No, but so they start looking at the 5.5s and 6s is the bigger line, because with Denver over the Giants, that's a 7.
Yeah.
You got Green Bay, the 6.5 there, and all that basically says is they're favored by that much to win, but that doesn't mean so you're gonna have to do some handicapping besides having the odds maker do the picks for you. I mean, this is you may not want to use Kansas City because you may need them at Christmas or
exactly and Thanksgiving.
Or Thanksgiving. So that makes it tough. It makes it tough. So what else you got going on this week? Talk about.
Well, we could talk about teasers that have been nicely done, and of course, it's hurt a little bit more when you want to back favorites in teasers because when you don't have games over 6 or 7, you're basically eliminating favorites because you really don't want to, unless you have a good reason to. You don't want to give up that 0 by crossing over 0, like going from -3 to +3. That might be the one possible exception.
Denver would be a potential. Because there's 7, you can knock it down. You could you knock New England down. That's another one.
And the Packers.
Yeah, and if you exactly. And you could go to Monday night. Detroit's sitting at 5.5, but that's obviously not going to get the full 6 advantage. But
No, and
you
in
take
fact, what you do in that play, let's say you wanted to do a 4-team teaser of the Patriots, the Broncos, what was the other one we mentioned? I think the Packers and the Lions. What you might want to do is figure out, first of all, what the VIG is on that if you did the teaser, because you're basically putting everybody right around 0, and the Packers, the Lions plus 0.5 if it stays 5.5. And do a 4-team money line parlay of minus 300, minus 320, whatever it is. A 4-team parlay might pay a little bit better than what the standard 4-team teaser would pay.
I think you're right, and especially since they've raised the juice on the teasers.
Yeah,
well, that's probably true. Now, we always talk about taking teasers and doing it with the favorites, but this is not that kind of a league. I mean, we have really no A type teams. They're more B teams and less. So you could actually tease teams with the underdog. Like
that's what I'm getting to. Is that a lot of attractive underdogs now, especially. I mean, Bengals on tonight. We're doing this right before the start of Thursday night. I don't know that I would tease the Bengals up because they could easily get blown out even by Pittsburgh.
That's not the type of thing you want. No,
but maybe the Jags in London from +3 to +9. Maybe I don't know about the Dolphins. I'm not crazy about it, but you could tease them up at Cleveland because Cleveland is offensively challenged, but 2.5 to 8.5. Saints, I don't know if I want to tease them up to 11 against the Bears. Vikings is one that I like because keep in mind, Eagles, they lost to the Giants last Thursday. They have a rematch with the Giants next Sunday. So
that's incredible.
That's a more important game than this one is, and the Vikings are playing well, but we don't know about McCarthy versus Wentz. Colts, +1.5 against the Chargers. That might be one to tease up. I don't know about the Cowboys and the Commanders because I could see that being a one-sided game either way because both teams have really good offenses. Commanders have a decent defense, but their offenses will be hampered by, I think, McLaren. We don't know if he's going to be back. Brown, and I think
Lamb is going to play this week
for the Cowboys. Yeah,
yes.
So that might be one. And then the Falcons. Do I want to play them +8 against the 49ers? 49ers are going to get Kittle back, but they don't have, the defensive kid, Warren on defense, who's now out for the year. And they're still missing. I think the word is now Mac Jones will get the start. Purdy, I think they want to hold out a little bit. And then maybe at the very end, you could put the Texans in, go from +3 to +9. And if you're alive on the number of, if you did more than just a 2-team teaser with all these underdogs, you could do a hedge back and lay some points with Seattle and possibly get a nice 5 to 7 point middle, depending upon any line moves in the game.
And you could actually play a money line Seattle if you had live on Houston. That's for sure.
Yeah,
you could do that.
Yeah,
and so I mean, not everybody would recommend this, but if you've got a weather game, like Cleveland is going to be a weather game. It's going to rain. It's going to be windy. Chicago is going to be the same thing. It's going to be raining and it's going to be windy. You might look at totals as a potential, it's a little sketchy, not something that I'm going to sit here and say this is the best thing to do in the world, but you take a 46.5 up to a 52.5
and play it under,
that's pretty. And then you take this game here, Cleveland was 41. It's now down to 36 or 37.5. You might want to bump that up and you say, hey, with the wind and the rain, you got Miami coming in. It's going to be colder. They've never played really well in any kind of cold weather anyway. And then you have the other team that I mentioned, who's an indoor team, the Saints, playing outdoor in the rain, in the wind in Chicago. That may be too much to overcome because you got a young quarterback, you got a young team. And they're not used to playing outdoors to begin with. And then you add the rain and the wind. So you got some elements. You got some things you can think about.
Well, go back to the game last week between the Rams and the Ravens. I forget what the total was in there. It was in the mid-40s, and it turned out to be a 17-3 game. I think that was played. Wasn't that played in the rain last week from the East Coast?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And by the way, along the lines of what you're talking about with weather-related games, which tend, especially if it's sloppy and windy, tend to favor unders more than overs, and we see it in some of the adjustments. That would also work with one of your favorite things to do, and those are the alternate lines. Because if you think that, especially let's take Chicago and New Orleans for example. If the weather is as bad as you expect it to be, it might not be that much of a disadvantage for the Bears, who are favored anyway. But maybe it affects the Saints, who are offensively challenged to begin with. So maybe it ends up being a wider margin in the game, with the Bears doing more of the scoring. So maybe a game that might have handicapped at, say, 45 under normal conditions, maybe it now drops down to 41. And that drop is mostly going to be due to New Orleans' inability to score. And so therefore the Chicago team total, or the or the point spread itself. Instead of laying 5.5, maybe you lay 7.5 with the Bears if you like that.
Exactly, and you get plus money. You get plus money on that, and that's a good way to look at this. All of these teams, you don't have to stick with when you're doing all lines. You're looking for a way to get plus money by adjusting the spread. Like just an example. You made that perfect example right there. Take the Bears, lay 7.5, lay 8, lay 9, $50 a spot. You're getting plus money on all of them.
Yeah. And by the way, this thing with the weather, we're bringing up now, that's something to keep in mind once you start getting, mid to late October. We move the clocks back in another few weeks for daylight savings time. So it might be a little bit different because it'll be cold out earlier in the day than it normally is, especially for those 1 o'clock starts back east. But the weather certainly is a factor, but people often look at it as far as very often just totals, but it also affects the sides. And then it's a question, if you can find a team in the right situation that is capable of playing in such weather against an opponent, for example, that is not. And also if you switch surfaces, which is often going to be the case these days with fewer teams with artificial turf. So the Saints going outside, for example, and playing in Chicago, they're not only going into the elements coming out of a dome, and they're also going from turf to grass.
Excellent point. That is very, yes, that's big. That's really big, especially when you're talking about rain. The grass now they're wet, maybe even muddy.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Now, the standard thought is that you would think it would favor the offense because the receivers know when they're going to stop and cut, and the defense has to react, and they could be off balance on especially on a rainy artificial turf. But it also helps on in mud and dirt.
Where did Spencer Rattler play college ball?
I believe he played South Carolina.
Okay, let
me check that now.
But I'm wondering, a lot of these quarterbacks can't throw the ball when it's wet.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're especially your shorter quarterbacks, and he is not a big guy.
And ones with the smaller hands, like a David Craig, didn't he set the record for most fumbles as a quarterback?
Yeah, he couldn't handle it. And I understand that. But I'm not saying Rattler is that. I'm just trying to guess here. The guy
He did go to South Carolina.
Okay. He probably played some rain games, but I don't know what the results were. But that's something to think about. A lot of things you can put into your formula to try to figure out who's going to win. Excuse me.
Yeah, for example, Chargers and the Colts is a very interesting game because of all the offensive injuries that the Chargers have to endure, affecting the offensive line, which affects Justin Herbert. So maybe if you like the Colts in that game, instead of taking plus 1.5, maybe you lay minus 2.5 or minus 3.5. And there'd probably be a significant jump between laying minus 2.5 and minus 3.5 because you're going over the key number 3. So let's say there's normally a 15-cent adjustment when you go from one number to another number, or maybe a 10-cent adjustment if you go from a half point to a full point. It might be a little bit greater than that. The going from 2.5 to 3 to 3.5 might be a little bit larger than you would normally get. I would think that would make sense because you're talking about a competitive game, and instead of laying 2.5, you're laying 3.5, which is a bad number to lay, but it might be worth the opportunity, especially because the Colts have been so good offensively this year that they've been scoring. I think they only had one game where they scored under 30 points.
And this is the stadium where they lost to the Rams, but only because the one guy dropped the ball going into the end zone.
Yeah. And the Rams scored on like an 88-yard touchdown play after that game was tied.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So they have been here. They know how to play here. The Chargers are, I mean, you can make a case for the Chargers. You can.
Yeah.
But the Chargers are hurting on the offensive line. They've really banged up. But
they've lost their top 2 running backs for the year.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. There's so many injuries in the league. It's really difficult to manage it. But it should be an interesting week. Andy, we'll cut it short a little bit this week. It's good information, everybody out there. I hope you enjoyed it.
Oh, I did want to make one point I forgot to bring up last week about Survivor. There were 4,646 contestants left. The Green Bay Packers, of those 46, 2,528 people were on the Packers against the Bengals, which is something like 58 to 60%, I believe, which I think is by far and away the largest percentage ever on a team in Survivor. And there's still over 4,600 people. And the other thing is Grandissimo, which I don't think we really talked about. They are down, I believe it's to 15 survivors. They started with 69. They also got hit pretty hard in the in that week 5 carnage that affected the full contest. And in fact, there was a possibility that we could have had a winner in Grandissimo last week because we had 13 people on the Packers and 3 others. One had already lost on the Eagles, and I forget who the other 2 individuals were on. But if one of those teams lost and the Packers lost, that contest would have been over.
Oh my God, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
that is really.
So as it was, they're down. They went from 16 to 15 now.
You know, it's amazing. We're only going into week 7.
Yeah,
it's $100,000 entry.
Yeah,
into that.
Oh, by the way, just following up on that, you talk about there's no real team to beat. I don't remember the last time. Well, I think Tampa Bay was 4-0, and I think there were a couple of other teams that were 4-0, and then I think Tampa Bay lost this next week, and I think Philadelphia also lost. And I think that was the week that Buffalo lost. They lost on the same day to go to 4-1. I think this is as early in many, many years that we have not had an undefeated team that goes 6-0 or 7-0 to start the season. And I think that to your point about there really being no outstanding team, because there are no unbeaten teams, and we're barely a third into the season.
You can see teams starting to blend together and starting to mesh. I mean, Kansas City, obviously, if people are looking at that and saying, hey, they look like they're back, and they very well could be. But, this is going to be it is a B league with a lot of injuries, and that's maybe why we're not getting that A quality team, because there's too many injuries. This year, it's been just ravished, the whole league. But,
and that's also explains, as we talked about before, and you mentioned it, that's why we don't have that many games with significant point spreads, because there's not that much difference between, the teams at the top are not at the top by that much. The teams at the bottom, well, really not all that much at the bottom either, because you take a look at some of the games like the Browns and the Dolphins play each week. They're both 1-5. Jets have yet to win. There are a number of other teams who are 2-4. And I think that as a result of that, you can't really lay big numbers unless you've got, like, let's say a Lions. Well, let's look at the game this week, which is the one that with the 12 point, the Chiefs against the Raiders.
Well,
you got an A against a C.
Well, if the Chiefs are actually an A, but they look like, now people are going to say they look like the best team in the league because of the way they're playing now, and it very well could be. But they could go to sleep against the Raiders. I mean, the Raiders could catch them napping. But
can they? But considering the offensive line, I mean, and we joke about it before that the Raiders are a balanced team with their offensive line. Bet against the run, bet against the pass. Will they be able to score enough against Kansas City to cover 12 points? If Kansas City scores 27 points, that probably covers the game. They might cover if they score 24. Maybe the Raiders don't get more than 10, 13.
They might cover if they score 14 because Geno looks horrible.
Yeah.
I mean, it's absolutely, they may not need any more than 14 or 17 to cover.
And Spagnuolo will be prepared to put some pressure on Geno, knowing what he's struggled with this year.
He's really having a terrible year. No question about it. Best game of the week could be the Tampa-Detroit game on Monday.
Yeah.
That's two quality teams that very well could end up in the NFC Championship game.
Yeah,
that's very possible.
I know. I know you are very. You've been on high on the Bucks since August, and since before the season started.
Yeah,
And there's nothing to suggest that they can. You never know about injuries, of course. And regardless of whether I like a team or not, I do not like to see injuries. I like to see the teams playing their best with their best. And Baker Mayfield has been a wonderful story.
Tampa hasn't played one game being healthy. They've been hurt all season. And if they ever got healthy, I don't know what the hell they'd probably start losing.
Yeah, they may get Evans back soon, and they got the other receivers who are out, but they're playing very well, even on defense. I think last week that 30-19 win was the first time that they won by any decent margin this year, any of their wins, and
absolutely.
It shows their capability to do so. There would be a day, and this is an interesting game because 2 years ago, the Lions knocked out the Bucks in the playoffs, if I recall. And last year in the regular season, I believe Tampa Bay got their revenge. I want to say it was early in the year at Detroit. I think I have it right. Maybe it's backwards, but I think that's the way it was. And that now the Lions are playing to avenge what I believe was that loss. I'll quickly check on that. But there's a little, when you're good teams, over a period of times, you get to see each other a lot because you're playing like a number one team against a number team, against a number one team. So I'm just going back. Yeah, last year, Detroit in week 2, Tampa Bay in week 2 defeated the Lions in Detroit 20-16 after Detroit had eliminated in the playoffs the previous season. So there's a little bit of history there. That might turn out to be a nice little rivalry now as well, especially with two capable quarterbacks leading their teams and defenses that are above average.
Baker Mayfield is the leader right now, MVP. He's been playing out of his mind, and I don't know if that can continue another 12 games, but it's been incredible to watch him. Andy, good job. Appreciate it. Everybody out there,
good information.
Everybody out there, subscribe. Please give us a thumbs up and like the channel and send in comments. We love to answer some of the comments.
If you have any specific questions about any of these topics, that would be wonderful.
Absolutely. Thank you, Andy. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks to all the viewers and listeners, and let's all have a great weekend.
That's right.